establish this Constitution. Beautiful words. But when we first gathered in Helena, I wondered how such a diverse group of people. Here we are, 100 people, very little political background, all walks of life. And we were assigned to write this Constitution in 60 days. And the truth of the matter is, we wrote it in less than 60 days. We did the unheard of. We gave money back to the state. And it was really significant. But there were several factors involved in allowing us to do this. First of all, the Montana Supreme Court had ruled that public officials, including legislators, could not serve as delegates. That was very important. And so it was easy. You know, for one thing, we decided to sit alphabetically. That's unheard of. Instead of the confrontational style of the Democrats on one side and the Republicans on the other, I know I was there. You know, there we were, sitting. And besides, what would we have done with the independents? We had quite a few independents there. So we sat alphabetically, and it worked beautifully. And then we started to forget about political parties. We beseeched the press. Stop referring to us as Republicans and Democrats and independents, just as delegates. And at that point, Betty Babcock, who's in the audience, she might be embarrassed about this, but she's so sweet. And she said, you know, it's nice that we're getting rid of political parties, but we 19 women delegates, we're referred to as Madam. And then sometimes they say, well, you yield, you know. It wasn't too good. So she Betty said, and she's so sweet, she just says, well, while we're at it, why don't we get rid of sex on the floor? Oh, I see Betty here. I'm sorry. I hope I didn't embarrass you. There are other delegates here. There's Jean Bowman here. There's Bob Woodmansee. There's Jerry Lindorf. I mentioned Bob Campbell. And Grace Bates is going to be 95 years old in a few days. Grace is right here. But there was another factor, too. And it's one that I feel is important. Some may not agree. But it's the fact that we had a unicameral legislature. Unicameral, no, I wish we had a unicameral legislature.
You lost that one, Arlyne.
That's real. But we had a unicameral body. We had one house, one chamber. And oftentimes people would say, if we had had another chamber down the hall, that Constitution wouldn't have been written in a designated time. It probably would not have been written at all. So, and you know, the interesting thing was, I brought my proceedings. I'm not going to read this. This is just one volume. This is volume 5. This is the one about the environment. But it's a verbatim transcript of everything that happened. And it was so exciting because when you read this, you know that Leo Graybill was the most wonderful chairman we could have had. He never cut off debate. He allowed every question. If you had any doubt about anything, you could ask. Sometimes Bob Woodmansee, remember we meet till late at night sometimes because he was such an excellent chairperson. And we knew what was going on. Having served in the legislature, I hate to digress, but during transmittal time, 45 days, and also the conference committees, I hope Joe agrees with this. Sometimes you don't know what's going on when you're a legislator. Well, many hours were devoted to the following environmental provisions, which is the strongest of any state. The Declaration of Rights, Article 2, Section 3, Inalienable Rights. You all have it in your Constitution before you. All persons are born free and have certain inalienable rights. The first one, they include the right to a clean and healthful environment. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then again in the Environment and Natural Resources Article, Section 1, protection and improvement. The state and each person shall maintain and improve a clean and healthful environment in Montana for present and future generations. My fellow delegate, C.B. McNeil, will tell you about that because he's responsible for putting in those words, maintain and improve. The fact that the United States Constitution, we're asked to talk about constitutions, and the fact that the United States Constitution does not include an environmental right has inspired many states to do so. I know prior to Earth Day in 1970, Senator Gaylord Nelson of Wisconsin attempted to get something in the U.S. Constitution which would have recognized a right to every citizen to a decent environment. However, his proposal failed. And there were others that followed, and they all failed. That's probably why many of the states said we have to do something in our state constitutions. And when the Montana delegates studied the other state constitutions, we wanted ours to be stronger. And we were able to study them because of people like Rich Bechtel in the audience. I don't see many other researchers, but you'll be meeting them. And they gave us so much material. I mean, this is nothing. I mean, remember, Grace, all those books we received before the Constitution? When we were elected in November, we spent, I think, every day between November and the convening of the Constitution Convention looking at all those. We looked at every state. But as a result of our Constitution, in the Montana Law Review, Barton Thompson Jr. wrote an article in 2003 that stated, quote, "The provisions Montana delegates drafted are still at the cutting edge of state constitutions. The Montana Constitution provides not only for maintenance of current environmental quality, but improvement of the environment. Moreover, Montana is one of only 2 states to impose a duty on each and every citizen to protect the environment. Finally, Montana is one of only 3 states to recognize environmental interests not only of a current population, but future generations," unquote. One of my heroes of the convention, I wish she were here, is Louise Cross. She was the chair of the Environmental and Natural Resources Committee. She tried so hard in the weeks of work to get her wording into the proposal. It didn't work. She was rather dejected. But I have a quote I took right from this proceedings. On March 1st, 1972, we were making our final decision about what wording to use. In her appeal, she said, and I quote, "Does the air we breathe contribute to our health and general welfare? Do we, as individuals, have anything at all to say about how we can protect ourselves from pollution?" Fortunately, on that day, correct wording was suggested by the end of the day. And many of you have seen that documentary, For This and Future Generations. And Bob Campbell was featured. And when you read the proceedings, you know that it was a long day. And Bob was talking. He was talking about the right to a clean and healthful environment. And I'm afraid many of the delegates were not listening. And Chairman Graybill rapped his gavel, and he said, "I want attention. I want you to listen to what Bob has to say." And I'll quote a little bit about it. Bob really, he just spoke from the heart, and this time everybody listened. Because he said, "I sincerely do not feel that you can go to your hometown when this is over, walk down the street, and someone will come up to you and say, 'What did you do about the environment in the Constitutional Convention?' You'll have to look in the eye," he said, "and you'll have to say, 'Yes, we the people in Montana at the convention decided to have one, decided to have an environment.'" Now, what sense does that make? You know? And it was at this point the delegates realized we have to include the words, and we put in meaningful words, clean and healthful, and we have Bob to thank for that. The first time the Montana Supreme Court interpreted the constitutional right to a clean and healthful environment was in Montana Environmental Information Center versus the Department of Environmental Quality. That was argued, and actually the decision was made in 1999. DEQ had allowed a gold mining company to discharge groundwater that was very high in natural occurring arsenic into the Blackfoot River. The court found that the legislative exemption, because the legislature had passed a law that permitted this, the legislative exemption from the Montana Water Quality Act was unconstitutional. The court's language says it all. We conclude that the delegates' intention was to provide language and protections which are both anticipatory and preventative. The delegates did not intend to merely prohibit that degree of environmental degradation which can be conclusively linked to ill health or physical endangerment. Our Constitution does not require that dead fish float on the surface of our state's rivers and streams before its far-sighted environmental protections can be invoked. Thanks to the Supreme Court for saying that. Unquote. I'm going to have to conclude pretty soon. I think my time is up, is it? Oh, my time is up. Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness. Oh, I'm going to leave out 2 paragraphs. In conclusion, when the remaining Constitutional Convention delegates congregate in Helena for our 40th reunion on Friday, June 15th, we hope that many of you will join us at the state capitol. You'll see something in your packet about that. My daughter noticed it immediately. Thank you, Ken. You're all invited. It'll give you a chance to talk to some of the delegates. You know, there were 100 of us, and now there are 32 left. Sometimes we begin to feel like Civil War veterans. You know? We don't know who'll be the last one standing, but I hope that some of you come because it's a chance to talk to some of us. Jean Bowman, did I mention you before being here? Yes, I thought I forgot somebody. I think we see somebody just came in who was a delegate, I think. Hey, Dan, hi, we missed you. Well, in any case, I'm so glad that you're all here. And delegates are so proud that we had a role in protecting the future of our beautiful state for this and future generations.
Howdy. We've got a raucous Saturday morning crowd. You know, I've spent my entire life in Montana's mountains and great outdoors. I'm from a blue-collar family of 14, and I've lived almost entirely off wild game and fish my entire life. Kayaking, mountain marathon racing, fishing, and bow hunting. Enjoying Montana's environmental perks is the substance of my life. In fact, with respect to bow hunting, last night when Brian Kahn mentioned that the quote from John Adams was a new bow in his quiver, I almost jumped up and said, wait a second, Brian, you don't put bows in a quiver, you put arrows in it. And in fact, some of you may have noticed while Arlyne was speaking, my cell phone accidentally went off, and it's an elk bugle. That's my ringtone in case it rings accidentally when I'm up in the woods. I don't want to scare away the elk. And while I was not a CONCON delegate, I even have my own environment-related section in Montana's Constitution, as Irma alluded to, Article 9, Section 7, Preservation of Harvest Heritage. The opportunity to harvest wild fish and wild game is a heritage that shall forever be preserved to the individual citizens of the state and does not create a right to trespass or on private property or diminution of other private rights. I wrote it, successfully sponsored it through the legislature, and spearheaded the successful statewide campaign that culminated with the voters passing it with more than 80% of the vote, believed to be the highest percentage of any constitutional amendment in Montana's history. And shortly thereafter, the head of the Montana Wildlife Federation approached me and he said, Joe, how does it feel to have your own section of the Montana Constitution with your name on it? So with that background, it may seem paradoxical that I'm somewhat critical of the Montana Constitution's environmental rights declarations, and I in fact authored the 2010 voter information pamphlet arguments in favor of a new CONCON for Montana. Why? Because I believe that there are certain flaws in the Montana Constitution's Declaration of Rights, including